Good morning. Welcome to ICOSA's Driving Force Radio, where we discover what drives today's leaders. On today's show, we are joined by many members of the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce, and we're going to be talking about strong communities, thriving communities, and what is really at the bottom of economic development in our communities. With us in this first segment is CEO John Brackney, who has been with the Chamber for a long time, has a very rich history here in Colorado. I want to welcome you to the show, John.
Glad to be here, John.
You know, over the last few years, we've seen so much economic difficulty, and while Colorado has fared fairly well in the overall scheme of things, we have seen some uncertainty and difficulty in our communities. Can you describe kind of what the current business climate looks like and what we can expect going forward?
Sure. For almost every business, large and small, 2012 is going to be a good year. Depending on the industry, though, it may not be a thriving year, but it's going to be better than the last couple.
How come?
I think it's because all the weak companies hung on as long as they could, and they're no longer hanging on. And so there are societal ramifications to the difficulties we've had. But most of the business CEOs I know are planning on a pretty good growth pattern for all of 2012.
What do you think going forward? What are we going to see going forward?
Sure. It is a totally different world, and we all know that. But most of us don't execute our day-to-day business operations like it is a new world. So as far as rapid, increased exponential growth and as far as communications, as far as the customers having more and more impact on the way people do their business, increased communications, I mean rapid fire. I don't know if this sounds surprising to you or your listeners, but I am congressman on Facebook now. Just 5 years ago, there'd be layers of staff in between that. The world is changing. Customers, when they complain about a business, may be able to tell hundreds of thousands, if not millions, the mistake a business makes. So the world is continuing to get smaller and smaller and quicker, and companies that are ready to adapt to that should do just fine, but there are still some dinosaurs out there that may find they're no longer in business.
Well, and you know, John, you talk about this rapid fire environment, and I would venture to guess, and I could be completely wrong, so I'm interested in your take on this. You know, you see sort of those mid-level and higher, larger corporations being able to deal with that rapid fire, but I would think that for small and smaller mid-sized businesses that might be quite an investment to be able to address this rapid fire environment. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Almost. Very large businesses understand communication and transportation and how fast it's changed, but also the smallest businesses do a pretty good job of it as well. And the reason for it is they don't need a lot of customers. And so the human relationship, the one-on-one kind of dynamic, they know that one of their customers or clients asked them to be a Facebook friend or asked them to post a comment on Yelp. And so they do it because it's their customers asking, and it's easy to do things in the micro, and sometimes it's easy to do things in the macro. But you're absolutely right. For small and mid-sized companies that don't have either a small enough customer base to do it or large resources to do it, they're kind of lost in the wilderness, spending lots of time, wasting time, trying to figure out this brave new world we're in this century.
Well, and I want to come back to that brave new world conversation a little bit. You know, I know that at the Chamber, at the South Metro Denver Chamber, you guys are so steeped in new technologies, and you're really sort of driving the way, leading the way in social media and engaging social media in communications as well as in action. And I know that you're so activity-based, so action-based. Can you explain a little bit how you guys incorporate the social media new frontier into the work that you guys do?
Sure. And I do have some advice for your listeners right off the bat, that social media is no different than old-fashioned word-of-mouth marketing. The handshake that is done, that we still do a lot of, there's no difference, but people take it as different. They take their electronic persona and somehow try to make it different. They try to take and present their company in a different way than if you were walking the front door of the company and that's just a huge mistake, because now we're dependent on the views of our clients and our contractors and our customers, just more so than we've ever been. And so as long as you realize that how you present your company in the real world should be how you present it electronically to the world, then you eliminate a lot of those mistakes. So yes, we use Meetup and Facebook and LinkedIn. We use all the types of tools that bring people together, and hopefully very effectively. If you think about the Front Range of Colorado, for example, we now have 6,000 business people active in 40 different groups, or think chambers of commerce within a chamber of commerce that meet 500 times a year. I would have to have double the amount of my staff. So we get paid to connect people together. Just 5 years ago, I would have to have a 40-person staff rather than a less than 20-person staff just to do all that event management and communication. And now it's totally changed because you can determine what kind of events you want to go to because it's online, sometimes months in advance, where before we'd have to actually get on the phone, and we still use the phone quite a bit, but get on the phone and call you.
Sure, sure.
Totally different world now.
It is a different world. And, you know, I want to switch gears a little bit. Again, the leadership that you guys provide in our communities at the South Metro Denver Chamber, and there are so many of those chambers within a chamber, if you will. Explain a little bit the relationship between this thriving business community that goes on and strong communities in general.
Yeah.
I imagine they have some sort of nexus that goes there.
Yeah, in fact, your next guest will have some good information on this. But I happen to believe that, from a layman's standpoint, that we forget how the human brain works. And so what I mean by that is that there are literally hundreds of business leaders in the Front Range of Colorado who believe that we are somehow going to survive and thrive no matter what happens down at the state capitol, or no matter what happens in the federal government, or what happens overseas. There's lots of outside influences that despite the best of your planning, you may get totally waylaid by other outside influences.
Sure.
And we're still going to survive or thrive regardless. And so what I mean by that is I think human beings make a conscious, not a subconscious, a conscious decision whether they're going to somehow figure a path through or somehow be willing to accept decline. And we see it in communities, we see it in states, and we see it in nation states. And as a stereotype, and a fairly accurate stereotype for Colorado, we are entrepreneurs, we're inventors, we're problem solvers, and we are going to, if the business gets really rough, figure out a sub-business, figure out an alternative path to move our business forward. And we're really good at collaborating in Colorado. And I think it's probably because we have so many newcomers to our state that we're always looking for the next thing and the next frontier. And in fact, when you talk pure economic development, one of your other guests, we were just at the GPS opening at Lockheed Martin yesterday. Mm-hmm. And when you think about the next frontier, the Great West, well, it's space. And it's all headquartered right here along from Colorado Springs to up north, along the Front Range of Colorado. We're constantly searching for the new frontier, and we can't solve all problems on our own, so we know we have to reach out to partners that have an expertise that we don't have. What I'm trying to describe is that some communities are going to figure that path out, and we're one of them. And other communities get tired. They decide that, oh my gosh, it's rough out there. It is a tough world in many ways. And you know what? I'm going to encourage my kids to move to some other community where there's better opportunities. Fortunately, we're one of the receivers of that. People want to move to Colorado.
People love Colorado.
They do,
sure.
And it's not just because of our mountains, though. We have a great quality of life. It's because of the people that will somehow figure out how to help future generations do well in this world.
So how should we be addressing the fatigue that you talk about? You know, there is fatigue all over this country, and I think you're starting to see fatigue even in business. And how can we be addressing that fatigue and continuing to maintain this strong community and strong quality of life that we already possess?
I believe in keeping things simple. And if you surround yourself with people that want to solve a problem, then your attitude changes and your mindset changes, and you get inspired and you inspire them. If you are dopey or pitiful, in which we all get that way once in a while, but if you surround yourself with people that are also in trouble, that are also failing, guess what? You're failing too. You've got to be in an ecosystem of people that care about you. And so that's part of our business model, is we're on a talent search. We're always searching for somebody who can create the next product, who can design the next answer to a problem, who can do things quicker, faster, smarter. And when you're in that kind of environment, whether it's a group of 3 or 4 people, or when you're a crowd of 800 or 1,000 people, unless you're just truly pitiful, and there are those folks, but unless you're truly pitiful, you raised your higher calling. You get inspired and want to make a difference. And that's what we're really all about, is making a difference and an impact in society. It goes along really nicely with ICOSA. Connection, collaboration.
Yeah, and I love that that's sort of that fundamental piece of who the South Metro Denver Chamber is and who you represent and who represents you. I think it's sort of that partnership and that collaboration. Briefly discuss what business leaders can do to ensure the collective success of our communities, John.
Yeah, first is you got to make your business model strong. Almost every company I know has vestiges of doing business the same way as 20 or 30 years ago. If there is, whether it's technology and still handwriting things out, if you think about how powerful all our iPods are now and how you can press a button and communicate with millions, why are we still handwriting? Shouldn't we take that information and put it on a blog, distribute it internally to employees instantaneously? All our systems are changing right in front of us, from education to religion to service organizations. You don't have to be a scholar to see it. It's happening right in front of our eyes. And so people should do that with their own business. They should make sure that they're competitive in this century. Once their own business is aligned, then it just doesn't make sense to be in isolation anymore. Because really, what is this battle all about? Why are we even in business? Well, it's really to leave something nicer for the next generation. It's to make sure your neighbor down the street is doing well. And so you should stretch out and get those best practices and help your fellow talented businesses survive. No one can live in isolation anymore. The reason is there'll be outside influences who will come and say, we don't like that isolation, thank you very much. And the next thing you know, you're out of business. You might as well go ask your customers and ask them constantly and repetitively and ask them to make a difference promoting your business. It's a really fun world if you just look for it. Get yourself aligned, help your neighbor, have a positive influence in public policy.
Thank you, John. When we come back, we are going to be exploring more of that competitive environment and understanding how we can create more thriving, better, stronger communities through academic ties to economic development. We have Dr. Becky Takeda Tinker with us in our next segment. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to ICOSA's Driving Force Radio, where we're looking at what drives today's leaders. Today's show is really about strong communities and really supporting strong economic development in our state. And in this segment, we are so honored to have Dr. Becky Takeda Tinker, the president of the Colorado State University Global Campus. Welcome to the show, Dr. Becky.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about Colorado State University's Global Campus and its role here in the United States?
Great, thank you. Yes, Global Campus is the nation's first 100% online, fully accredited university. It operates currently off of no state funds, so it does not receive cost for students, and we operate in a cash flow positive model. Its online basis provides an ability for a high quality, low cost education for students in Colorado and beyond. And our mission is to look at the over 38 million U.S. citizens who have some college but no degree. In Colorado alone, we have over 600,000. And so it is our mission to go out and let students know that there is an alternative to for-profit online education in a high-quality, affordable method and framework.
Sure. Well, and Dr. Tinker, it sort of begs the question, you know, if there are 38 million people out there in our world with some college, no degree, 600,000, I think you said?
In Colorado.
In Colorado alone. Higher ed has to be playing a huge role in state economic development and getting workers and helping support jobs. Can you address that a little bit, the role that higher ed plays in state economic development?
Absolutely. If we look at Colorado, we know that it's an attractive place to live, as shared by John Brackney. People want to come here. businesses want to come here, but we must have a qualified workforce in order for them to be able to populate and fill their needs for work. So education provides that vital gap in that we have a lot of people in Colorado. They're widespread. We're able to provide the education they need wherever they want it, whenever they want it, to get the skills and knowledge that they need so that they are attractive employees to companies not only that are currently in Colorado, but that are looking to come to Colorado because of its lifestyle and all that it brings to businesses. We also look at, from a Colorado perspective, the out-of-state tuition that we receive. We have millions of dollars in state financial aid, dollars that come in from students that live outside of the country as well as outside of Colorado. And then we look at what we're spending inside of Colorado and the employees that we hire. We have over 150 employees and faculty that are Colorado based. So for an economic hub in and of itself, we are driving that. And this year we will record about $22 million in revenue, and we will be positive net cash flow.
But Dr. Takeda Tinker, this is a startup, isn't it? Isn't this new? Isn't this one of those innovations in education that we've been talking about just now?
Highly innovative. The Board of Governors of the Colorado State University system allocated a $12 million loan approximately 3 years ago. In 2008, the Global Campus opened its doors to students, and we had about 200. And today we have over 5,000 students. We are adding 300 to 400 new students every month, and our retention rate exceeds 80%. Our time to graduation and completion actually is equivalent among all races. So when we look at underserved populations, of which we have 22% and 28% first generation, their time to degree completion is the same. So we're very proud of the fact we're able to have outreach, and we're able to incorporate all types of people, adults that need to finish their education or that are looking to advance their skills. We know that lifelong learning is absolutely critical to success. So whether you have a degree, whether you've earned a certificate, the fact that you can learn, you can critically think, you can make decisions based on information are all vital to keeping a job in this economy, and then also gaining a job. And when we look globally and the rate at which the world is changing, lifelong learning and that ability to think, assess information, and have a positive outcome have never been more vital. And this speed that we see today is only going to get faster.
Absolutely. Well, and I know too that as part of the membership at the Chamber of Commerce and the engagement that CSU Global brings to the South Metro area as well as the South Metro Denver Chamber, you guys bring a lot of valuable pieces to the table, to the membership as well as the board. Can you talk a little bit, address a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with the fantastic groups that are down there, and the work that you're supporting to help build these stronger communities out there in our Denver metro area?
Sure, thank you. One of the strategic missions of the Chamber is to develop leaders for the Chamber, for the communities, and for the organizations in which these people work. So Global Campus has stepped in to provide online leadership training that provides an interactive, asynchronous format so that committee chairs can come in and out of the online platform and learn. They will be able to read the lectures, interact with the videos, practice on mastery exercises, and really begin to understand what is leadership, how can I be an effective leader for my committee, and then how does that relate to their families, their communities, and then their workplace. And so Global Campus is very pleased to be able to provide through the Board of Governors the access for Chamber committee chairs to come on and enter the Global Campus online classroom and learn on their own, in their own time, in their own place, to have the skills and knowledge necessary to effectively drive their committees, to successful outcomes, which we then hope they will take into, again, communities and their organizations and families.
Absolutely. Dr. Takeda Tinker, how do we find Colorado State University Global Campus?
You can go to the internet at www.csuglobal.edu.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. When we come back, we have more with the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce. Welcome back to ICOSA's Driving Force Radio. You know, this whole segment today is really about leaders who are leading. They aren't ordinary people, they're extraordinary people, and they're seeing this world of possibility that's out there to create growing, thriving communities. In this segment, we are again joined by CEO of the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce, John Brackney, as well as the new Director of Economic Development, Jeff Hallwell, from there. Jeff, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
John, thanks again for being here.
Happy to be here, Jan. Hey, Jeff, what kind of trends are we seeing in the Front Range of Colorado as far as economic development?
You know, from a long-term perspective, the big trend we've seen up to date is a diversification of our economy. If you remember the 1980s when we complained about a lack of diversity, pointed in a few sectors, most would admit today that Denver is one of the most diverse economies of the major metro areas, which is a very positive development in the last 30 years. It also, for short-term growth, leads to a positive outcome as well. We can actually potentially hedge each other's bets. If one sector is doing poorly, another one can do well, and it will help our larger economy in general.
What are those trends? What are the major sectors out there?
The major sectors out there for the Metro Denver area, the Front Range of Colorado, let me put it that way, are aviation, aerospace, health and biosciences, energy, and that's energy in both the renewable sectors as well as the natural, fossil fuel sectors. Health and hospitals, just the health in general. And then you get into telecommunications, media, all of those kinds of technologies that have been pretty common here in our community but still play a major role. And then finally, I'll conclude with technology, software to hardware.
So the South Metro Denver area has certainly seen sort of a boom, if you will, over the last few years. What makes the South Metro area so attractive to organizations as they look to Colorado for expansion or further economic development efforts?
There are a lot of factors. I would say number one is the infrastructure that exists for business in general. When I say infrastructure, it's everything that's public, like Centennial Airport, the highway system of I-25, C-470, and T-Rex, which is very business friendly for people that need to commute, but also the infrastructure of existing office and manufacturing buildings. The square footage in South Metro Denver rivals, in fact, is larger than that of downtown Denver. So if you're an office looking for a site, you have just the chance of finding the appropriate site is greater than if you're looking in other parts of the metropolitan area. And then the people in general, the population of South Metro Denver is diverse and big, and people can attract individuals to come work for them from all sides.
Well, Jeff, I know that in your past life you've worked for the state, you've worked for cities, you're now at the chamber. Talk a little bit about how the growth in South Metro is going. I know there's many new major corporations, both from a foreign direct investment perspective as well as from just national investment into the South Metro area. Can you address some of that and some of the jobs that we're seeing go into that South corridor?
You know, it would just in general, if you think about the Colorado itself has 10 Fortune 500 companies that call it home, that are headquartered here. 7 of those 10 are located in the South Metro Denver area, which is a pretty impressive fact. Yeah. They draw workforce from all over the region, so it benefits the entire state of Colorado. However, the answers to those kinds of trends would be companies like Arrow Electronics that have now decided to call South Metro Denver home, and they're in the technology sector, like I mentioned earlier, growing from a a company 10 years ago which had a couple hundred employees in the state to now becoming their corporate headquarters. I believe they're around Fortune 140. But that's not the only one. That's the one that made the big news lately. But you can think of other smaller technology firms like Intuit, Trulia, those that draw from the same kind of workforce that we don't hear about every day but are still growing in our community. That's just in one sector. If you go to a whole other sector like financial services, we are home to many insurance companies, financial services companies, and their suppliers that really make our economy move. So it's not just the big announcements that we're concerned about.
So Jeff, you're a soul man shop, or how do you help us all improve our economy? Talk about what some of your initiatives may be.
You know, we're actually a team, and it's not even just the team of the organization I work for. Obviously, I work for the South Metro Chamber of Commerce, and we have a staff and a group of volunteers that are very helpful to us in our economic development work. But it's a team of all of our communities, our organizations that are concerned about economic development, the business community in general that were really are part of our efforts. The most significant activity that we're undertaking right now with our team is a business retention and expansion effort, where we intend to interview 1,000 major companies this year, primary and major employers, their CEOs, about why they are happy or why they're irritated by doing business in the South Metro Denver area. That's obviously going to require a lot of teamwork. One individual or a few individuals can't do that. There's just not enough time in a year to have a few people do it. So it's going to be a team of what we call BRE ambassadors. We need at least 100 to 125 folks doing the work, interviewing our companies and making sure that we get the data we need, but also the engagement we need to thank companies for doing work in our community.
You bet. And what do you do with the data when you get done with it? What's that going to do for economic development in the south end of town?
There's two things. One is very micro level data. If a company tells us that a factor is really causing them to not be productive in their community, we want to respond to that particular piece of data if they allow us to do so, to respond to it and find solutions to help them be successful as a business. From a macro level, when we learn that 900 out of 1,000 companies say something that we really need to address, we then can take those macro level data points and react to those as well, but probably in a public policy or a more streamlined fashion than you would for an individual company. So we intend to react in both ways.
Jeff, are there any big economic announcements coming out anytime soon that you can share with us, or good or bad?
You know, there are certainly a lot in the queue. Our partners in economic development are very busy right now in terms of economic development prospecting. Some of them they take time to announce, and I don't know if they will or not, but it's part of it's much like the real estate process. You sell, and then finally an announcement comes. What I do see on the horizon for South Metro Denver is not a big announcement, but some pretty significant growth in sectors like energy and technology that have been traditional but will continue to grow, and we're excited about that in general.
That's so fantastic to hear. How do we find more about the economic development group that you're running and the things that are going on in economic development in the south end of town? How can we find you?
The best place to find us is the Chamber's website, www.bestchamber.com.
Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll be talking about how public policy is helping to support thriving communities all across Colorado. Thanks for being with us. Welcome back to ICOSA's Driving Force Radio, where we're discovering what drives today's leaders. In this segment, we have Jeff Wasden, a small business owner of Proformance Apparel in Littleton, Colorado. He's also the director of the Public Policy Committee at the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce. And what's interesting about this committee is that it's focused on public policy solutions, not public policy, partisanship. And that's what we love about this and love about this part of the South Metro Denver Chamber. Also with us, John Brackney's here again. And John, I'm just going to give it to you.
Jeff, you've been a small business person for a long time. What is the business community thinking about politics and government in general?
You know, it's interesting. You'd think that there would be a lot more engagement involvement. I still think the economy right now is driving a lot of people to put blinders on, and people are focused on day-to-day tasks of keeping doors open, lights on, and that seems to be the primary focus. And I think they're relying upon groups like ours to do a lot of that heavy lifting for us, to stay involved, to keep the pulse out there, and to advocate for their rights and their business ownership, good and bad. Because there are some great legislation that is very helpful to business. Conversely, there are some things that are very damaging to business out there, and I think they're looking to groups like ours to do that for them, unfortunately.
So Jeff, what are some of those big concerns of businesses, both small and large, around Colorado? What are the big ones?
You know, the regulations, taxing is still, you're going to hear that probably, heard that 100 years ago, and you're hearing it in 100 years. I think people look for predictability. Business people like consistency. They like to know what the level playing field is going to be on a day-to-day basis when they go to work. So they're not going to be hit with some new things that they have to fill out forms, reply to this. Someone's going to be watching them, you know, over their back with this new regulation that the government imposed upon them. For the most part, business people want to go and produce. They want to do their job. They want to make sure they're taking care of their customers on a day-to-day basis, and they want government away and out of their lives. But in the fact that they do know government does have a role and is there, they'd like it to be in a manner that doesn't impede and hurt, but allows them to understand what the rules and regulations are upon them, keep them at a minimum, and allow them, again, to go out and take care of their job that
Absolutely.
they need to do.
Jeff, we've read a lot about super PACs, and we all know about lobbyists. How do businesses in Colorado effectively make a difference in public policy?
Well, most of the large companies probably have their own trade organizations and probably even their own lobbyists if you're one of the larger companies out there. It's the small companies, small businesses that doesn't have that. And I think that puts them at a serious disadvantage where they're looking more for chambers or organizations to be able to do that for them and move forward, because they're not going to be able to handle those types of expenses, demands that are placed upon them to be truly versed and up to speed on everything that happens. 600, 700, 800 bills introduced every single year here in Colorado. There is no way a single person who's responsible for running their business could track that, and so they're looking to those organizations. The larger ones, yeah, it probably gives them some undue influence and sway down at the Capitol, but good legislation is good legislation. Conversely, bad's bad, and I think sometimes no amount of money is going to influence good or bad. It certainly may give you a seat at the table when you're a small business owner. You may be knocking or looking from the outside trying to get in there, but I think it's organizations like ours that can do that work for them and advocate on their behalf.
Yeah, I want to ask a little more about that, Jeff. You know, you said small business is sort of at a disadvantage because they don't have those resources for the big PACs or associations representation. And the beauty of this collaborative public policy organization that you help facilitate and run at the Chamber is really providing that voice. How do you see business leaders, or do you need business leaders to become more involved, get more politically engaged in this conversation? And if so, how?
And can they make a difference?
And can they really make a difference?
Short answer to can they make a difference is absolutely. And I think, John, you've said this more than once, you know, peeling back the onion, the magic veil, there is really none. It's getting involved. It's rolling up your sleeves. It's participating. In some cases, it's just showing up. And I don't want to oversimplify that, but it isn't, there's no magic formula for that. You just have to have the interest, the passion, the willingness to get involved. Or in some cases, if something's threatening your business, the passion to go down there and fight for that and stand up and testify and contact your area legislators. Absolutely, the more involvement, the better. This isn't certainly something that you're looking to one person to carry that torch. There is advantages in numbers, and the more people that get involved, that step up, that take upon those roles, that can join these types of organizations. Certainly at the Chamber, we've got the Business Leaders Responsible for Government group, the Legislative Action, different groups that we're trying to advocate on their behalf.
And Jeff, really quickly, do you have to be a staunch R or a staunch D to participate, or can you be right there in the middle and still bring your voice?
Well, PC-wise, and knowing what John would want me to answer, no, I was just teasing. Absolutely. I think, and the fun about the Chamber, and if we're doing our job correctly, people don't know whether we're D or R. They just know we're pro-business, and
Great.
That's the only reason we're there for, whether you're a L, a G, a U, a D, an R, and I may have missed a couple letters out of there, but that should be our role, is so people don't understand that it is partisan. There are letters behind it, that it's just good, bad business policy, period.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll be wrapping up our segments about building strong economies. But Jeff Wasden, if you want to learn more, you go to www.proformanceapparel.com to learn more about the Public Policy Committee, bestchamber.com. And when we come back, we'll talk more about communities. Thank you. Welcome back to ICOSA's Driving Force Radio, where we're discovering what drives today's leaders. This whole show, we have been talking about the importance of building strong communities and the roles that economic development, public policy, academia play in those things. But at the end of the day, strong communities and strong business are really based on relationships. They're built on the greatness of the group, if you will, on the collaborative abilities of the people within those groups. In this segment, we're going to be talking with founder and publisher of ICOSA, Gail Denninger, and John Brackney. Welcome to the show, Gail.
Thanks for having me.
Sorry, I jacked up your last name there. But, you know, I know this relationship between you and John, Gail, and I know that it has some very colorful history that goes with it. Share a story or two from the history with John and the Chamber. I know you've traveled together. I know that you've been part of this ICOSA movement together. Address that a little bit.
Well, I think that John was actually very instrumental in the fact that ICOSA is around today. This started on a trip that we had in the Czech Republic. We had not known each other before that. Maybe we got a chance to say hi on the airplane. But it was when we were sitting down in the Czech Republic, particularly when we were drinking beer, that the whole idea of ICOSA hatched. I did have a little bit of a mock-up that I brought over there, and John, I know you've always given me a hard time about the condition of the mock-up, but if you could tell me what your first perception was, and I know that the only reason that you were nice to me was because you're trying to get my membership, but what did you really think about the idea?
You know, Gail and I know each other really well, and so to think about us being in Prague, where East meets West, where all the spies used to meet, that's where we met. So we've been constantly wondering which one's the spy and how we're fighting. I'm telling you, the magazine, although the inside was empty, and that's how I give him grief, he had the concept and the idea that we should be working together, connecting and then collaborating towards solving problems to build a better world. And how can a guy like me not fall in love with a guy like Gail, who has this vision for making a better and a different society? So I've been a huge fan almost from the start. Even though he didn't have it laid out, the contents weren't there, it hadn't been collaborated yet. He had the idea of bringing talent together to solve common problems. I've been a huge fan ever since Prague.
Well, and Gail, I know that the ICOSA magazine was started in late 2008. And there were so many economic things going on at the time. We were seeing businesses drop like flies. You know, it was really this time to really begin collaborating. And I know you've done a lot of historic research on great collaborations throughout history and folks that are making a difference in their communities. Share why you started the magazine and how you enlisted John's help and the Chamber's help in the effort.
It probably was a decision that was at least counterintuitive. It might have not even been a wise decision, but it feels like when there's some kind of a problem that you have to do something. So rather than just wring our hands, I remember the day that you and I sat in the office and we decided that it was a bad enough time right now that we should start doing something. So I think that the magazine was born out of desperation and to give us a chance so that we wouldn't be desperate forever. We've been able to build many relationships, have wonderful experiences, and overall it's not only helped our business, but many people around us that we allow to use the magazine as a platform for them to have economic development or to be able to go out and sell their services.
Absolutely, and I know, John, too, you said, you've been quoted as saying it's more than a magazine, that it's a movement. How did you get to that perspective?
Yeah, and it's because he didn't just lay it out and say, this is what I am, I'm the publisher and it's going to be this. Almost every conversation Gail has with a business is about their business, about their community, about problems they see, and how can we work together to effectively change things. And if you do it good enough and long enough, it's no longer about Gale, it's no longer about ICOSA, it's more about how we meet and how we treat each other and how we listen to each other, and then how we embark upon a new journey together. And so I have said it's more of it than a magazine, it's a movement of people creating a better world. And I know that sounds all idealistic and almost crazy, but you've now had a long track record of success, not only with businesses in Colorado, but internationally. People are paying attention to ICOSA magazine because it attracts talent and it solves problems. That's a movement, not a magazine.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. If you want to learn more about the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce, go to www.bestchamber.com. To learn more about ICOSA Magazine or to get your free subscription, go to theicosamagazine.com. And to learn more about Driving Force Radio, go to facebook.com/drivingforceradio. Thanks so much. Have a great day.